From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Ciara Speller. President-elect Donald Trump will be inaugurated into his second term on Monday, January 20th. And since his election in November, he's been naming cabinet nominees and other senior positions in his administration. He's also announced that he'll issue executive orders beginning on day one, including an increase in tariffs, mass deportation of migrants, and reducing the federal workforce. So today on 22 News in Focus, we'll be looking at the impact of a new administration in the White House, the changing political landscape, and the economy. Joining me now is Tony Signoli, a political consultant with A.L. Signoli Company. Tony, always a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you, Ciara.
So let's just start with the basics. You know, what do we think drove people to the polls this year?
The economy, the economy, the economy. Whatever you thought of it, the perception of it, the reality of it, it was the economy. We saw that in every state we were involved in. No matter if it was a blue or red state to begin with, that was the major issue. The cost of everything, that was driving folks. And the perception of overall America not feeling that we were heading in the right direction. So they did something incredible and brought back a president who had lost the Oval Office. I mean, it's been a heck of 100 years since that's happened before.
Yeah, and so, you know, why do we think that people voted for Trump? I'm sure this is an answer, you know, that has many answers, but, you know, what are we thinking?
Well, there'll be books written about this one for the next decade. But the reality, when you've got double-digit inflation, when you've got a significant immigration crisis, and when you've got massive wars in two different parts of the world that largely the United States is funding or has a role in, that's the kind of stuff that gets folks uptight. It's on their mind. And on the Democratic side, as good of a candidate as Kamala Harris was with 15 weeks to play, she never was able to articulate anything to distance herself from the perception of Joe Biden and the perception of these difficult issues. The main issue for her that she was able to articulate well was on abortion. That wasn't enough. You had to hit the other issues.
Yeah, and so in the days after, we've seen a lot of Democrats, you know, across the country and even here in Massachusetts saying that this is kind of a wake-up call, that, you know, we need to promote more of our goals and what we stand for. You know, what do we think?
Absolutely. So the amazing $1.5 billion spent in 15 weeks on the Democratic side, and that's just the straight money, as we like to call it now. That's not the PACs that were also supporting the Democratic ticket, supporting Kamala Harris. Stunning, absolutely stunning. And all of that messaging just never seemed to really get home to folks. And the more simplistic messaging of the PACs supporting Donald Trump, they were able to hit at those issues that we just talked about, economy and talking to average, regular folks and making them feel a little bit more comfortable with what they believed Trump would be able to do.
And so, as we mentioned, Trump has been building his White House team. Some of his cabinet secretary choices have been met with criticism as well. You know, are there any conservatives in the House and Senate that don't see eye to eye with Trump?
What a great, great, great question. 2 weeks ago, we would have said yes. In normal politics, in normal Washington, which hasn't been normal since 2016, since Donald Trump. There are Republicans who have significant issues, obviously they had with Matt Gaetz. There are many that are going to bring up their issues and problems with Dash Patel. Certainly his nominee for Secretary of Defense, Hegseth, in trouble. However, Trump has doubled down on all of them except Gaetz. And what we're seeing is Republicans are coming around. Donald Trump controls what was the Republican Party, and his hold on D.C. is incredible right now. I don't think he's going to have a lot of trouble. There'll be questions, especially for Patel and especially for Tulsi Gabbard and certainly Bobby Kennedy's confirmation hearings. That's going to be the stuff for Netflix movies down the road. But I think they're pretty much all going to get through.
How do we feel that the American people are feeling about these appointees?
They see this as it's Donald Trump's mandate. It's Donald Trump's White House. And they're actually kind of getting the drift from the perception that's out there right now, from the podcast to the work that the Trump and Trump PACs are continuing to do, that these are choices that are going in to drain the swamp. These are folks who are going to shake things up. And whatever we may think of some of these folks, that is the biggest thing that the American public continues to look for. They're always looking for cut the corruption, cut the spending, make it different. At some point, though, they've got to say, is this really affecting me? Is this getting down to me? How do they feel about it right now? I can't say so much as it's hopeful as it is really waiting to see the first 100 days. There's a perception that Trump will move quickly.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. The first 100 days, it's kind of the make or break. It sets the stage. You know, what do you think we should expect from the administration?
You're going to see Donald Trump move quickly to sit there and hit executive action. He'll be signing a variety of things right off the bat. And the biggest one, it's going to be on immigration. You're going to see him keep those promises that he made. He sees this as a major issue, obviously. It's one that his base sees as significant, and it's one he's going to hit out of the ballpark early. Because, again, perception, whatever we see as far as the folks being deported, perhaps, or even the aspect of getting through the quote-unquote paperwork of immigration. How many folks are out there that are asylum seekers? How many people have been in the country already 20 years? Can we expedite and get this moving? That whole concept that we're hearing about from Elon Musk in that regard. That's, I think, the first thing that you're going to see. And you're going to see these executive orders, one after another. You'll also see him start to focus on taxes, because a lot of the taxes that he was able to get through in his first term come up next year. You'll see him protect and guard that part of his legacy.
And what about any concern about checks and balances in the government with a Republican White House and the majority in Congress?
It should always be there. It's what the Constitution is based on. But one of the things that I'm hearing about this, even from Democrats, even policy players who have been around for a long time, and I'm hearing it from academics and economists, is that that day is done. We should have checks and balances, but there's almost a feeling from the electorate overall, and it's across the board. It's not just Republicans, it's Democrats, and we're tired of it. Just go fix this, do whatever you got to do. It's broke. If you got to break it some more, do it. That's what we're seeing in polling even after the election, Sierra. People saying, I went for Trump because of, I want to see monstrous change, massive change. Some of that same messaging from 2016 worked for him well in this election in 2024.
Yeah, and what are some of the monstrous changes, like you said, that people maybe not understanding exactly what's going to be happening?
Some that will be interesting, and we'll hear it from some of the other folks that will be on the show today, better suited to speak to it than myself. But Social Security, protection or not, taxes, tax code, a lot of stuff that usually makes the electorate's eyeballs glaze over, right? But this is the serious stuff that this administration is going to have to get into right now, too. One thing that we didn't hear a lot about during the campaign was the deficit. You know, that amount of money and what it's going to cost us in the long run. These are the variety of things, I think, first and foremost, that you're going to see this administration take a look at quick. What's impressive is whether we like them or not, the folks that Donald Trump has put forward, it's unusual to see. I've seen so many names so quickly put forward. Shocking, in fact.
Yeah, lastly, I want to touch on this because, you know, a lot of people have been talking about the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East as well, with Trump's policies. You know, what are we thinking we're going to see moving forward?
I think that's in the first 100 days, too. Donald Trump wants legacy. He's not going to be able to run for president of the United States again unless he changes the Constitution, right? So this is it. He can get away with doing anything he wants to in that regard. He doesn't have to worry about re-election. So relative to Ukraine, relative to Israel, Gaza, and beyond now, my goodness, Syria, looking at what's happening in Somalia, Sudan, and whatnot, you're going to see Trump go strong with the big stick, so to speak. This isn't going to be Teddy Roosevelt walk softly, carry a big stick. This is, I've got this, and I'm going to use this. He knows how to negotiate in that regard. And again, whether folks like him or not, we're seeing already around the planet, he's getting a response to that. When the president of France, a very liberal, progressive guy, goes to pay homage in court to Donald Trump, that's pretty amazing. When the Canadian Prime Minister goes to Mar-a-Lago, they've got the drift. He's calling the shots, and this is going to be a strong arm, strong kind of government coming from Donald Trump. Not a guy to say easily say no to.
And lastly, what are we thinking about the tone of the inauguration? I was at President Trump's first inauguration. I was a young student journalist, and now, you know, in my career, I'm eager to see what the tone of the next inauguration will be like. What are you thinking?
If he listens to some of the advisors around him, he's going to remember one big thing this time. This is television. It's a made-for-television event. You know, despite social media and podcasting and all the new age of things and AI, it's still the TV camera. I think this time he will be more careful in the message that he puts out there. You're not going to see the rock'em sock'em of 2016. He knows he can set a course here. And that, again, he's got nothing to lose because he's won everything. He's got the House, he's got the Senate, he's got the Judiciary, he's got the executive branch. I think you'll see that kind of a speech. And from a little bit that I'm hearing from some players around him, this is one where he knows it's a legacy speech. Start a new tone.
All right, Tony,
Yeah.
always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your
Sarah.
insight.
Thanks.
And after the break, we'll be talking about what we can expect from the financial markets in 2025 with a local financial advisor. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We're discussing the impact of the recent election on the economy and political landscape. The economy was a big issue for many Americans and how they voted. But economists are saying that the U.S. economy saw a huge comeback after the COVID-19 pandemic. Many industries are booming and seeing big profits. Joining me now is Mark Teed, Senior Vice President of Investments with Raymond James. We thank you for being on the program, Mark. Always great to see you.
It's my pleasure, Sierra.
So let's just start with Wall Street and the world's markets, how they reacted once President Trump won a second term.
It was euphoric the first night. I mean, the futures that night had been up more than I've ever seen them, like 2,000 points, which is really extraordinary. So the markets, I think it was partly because of a pro-growth president's policies anticipated, but I think it was also the certainty of knowing that it was over. It was so close, and it was so up in the air up until the last minute. I think the markets were finally relieved that the interest rate cuts had started and that the presidential election was over. So I think it was more the certainty than it was just Donald Trump.
And in terms of momentum, what are we expecting moving forward? Do we think it's going to continue?
You know, it feels like it. I've been running around lately with this image of a woman wrapped in the American flag pointing this way saying go. And I'm calling that the United States of acceleration. I think right now the U.S. economy is the strongest it's ever been in the history of our country.
Okay.
And so I think it continues. I think there's just so many new key areas of growth. And whether it was Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, it really didn't matter. It was go time.
What would it take to slow things down?
A good recession. Not in the forecast, but a good recession would do it. Some cataclysmic event like a bomb being dropped on us. Something that appears out of the blue, like a black swan event. But right now, it just, we've checked all those boxes, and it just doesn't look like there's anything out there that could really derail things. So things do feel good, and I think we've got to tip our hat to us as Americans. We've gone through 2008, where the markets went down almost 60%, and then 2020, during COVID, we went down another 45%. We came through both of those with flying colors and distanced ourselves from China and Europe and the rest of the world. So we're a pretty strong country. I wouldn't want to compete with us.
And in terms of, the election results, which industries are seeing the most growth right now, would you say?
All of those that are looking like regulations are going to be lifted on them. And I think the financials, think the big banks. The Dodd-Frank legislation was, some people say it was 27,000 pages of regulations to tell regulators how to regulate the banks. It's onerous. So I think in many cases those will be lifted. So you've seen the financial stocks go up on average, I think about 13%. So I think that would be a good industry. Other industries where there's power needs would also be good industries, because there's, he wants to drill, baby, drill. You've heard that. But also it's about power now, because AI is generating immense amounts of power demand.
And for downturn, have we seen any sectors, in that downward trend?
The only sectors right now that look vulnerable are the ones that are being doged by Elon Musk and Vivek. And I specifically think of, locally we're very interested in the F-35 coming to Barnes. That's one of the things that might be on the table, is cutting the F-35 plane to save, a lot of money. So it's industries like that where they see a new way to do things. Elon is such an innovator that, anything that's not up to speed or, on the forefront of change, they might be in trouble.
And tariffs, I think we had you on the program the day after the election. We were talking about tariffs. It's a word that we're hearing a lot, but I'm not sure that people are really understanding what that entails. So let's break that down.
Okay, tariff is a word, it's a Latin word, and it really means to set the price. And nowadays, what tariffs mean, to set the price, is to set the price so that your other countries don't have an advantage over you. So that's what's happening with Donald Trump and tariffs. He put them in 2018. They're still around, and I think he's trying to add more. I think he's starting to like hearing himself say the word tariff. It must be a new word for him. So I'm a little fearful, because the history in the long term of tariffs is not good, because it really just leads to more inflation. However, in the short term, it gives you maximum amounts of leverage when you're the United States and you could say to Canada or Mexico, we're going to increase your tariffs by 25%. You notice how quickly those presidents jumped when he said that.
And for local businesses, what would tariffs mean for them?
that creates more uncertainty. So we got rid of some uncertainty when we elected him as president, but more uncertainty from tariffs. Yes, it's a big question.
Okay. And under President Biden, infrastructure projects were a huge priority. We saw a lot of things happening in regards to infrastructure here in Massachusetts. So do we think that this is going to continue under the new administration?
Donald Trump ran as a cost cutter. He's going to bring things down. But we found out his first term that he loves to spend. So I don't think those spending projects are going to go away so much as he's going to try to grow his way out of it, which works as well. So if you can grow at 3, 4, 5% GDP quickly, those numbers will make sense, and we can have all that spending that he so much loves.
And in terms of interest rates, what are we thinking about interest rates?
Well, I think if I was going to make a prediction, I would say by 2027 rates will be down about 2 points from where they are now. If they're around 4.5 now, they'll probably be 2.5 or 3%. If I had to make a guess, we're going to probably see a slowdown. The bottom 50% of income earners in America aren't doing that well. So there's going to be a drag on the economy. Unless we can create a lot of new jobs with what Trump is talking about, we're going to probably see a drag there. So probably rates will come back down by 2027.
And employment rates, speaking of rates, fell. Are we thinking moving along?
Yep. Well, we got AI rising right now, and AI is potentially a job killer. Software eats the world. So at some point, a lot of people that have jobs now that are comfortable might actually be out of work. But there'll be a whole new creation of jobs, but I'm not sure how fast that's going to happen. So we could see some labor problems down the road.
Something else people seem really excited about, Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
Right, so following the election, Bitcoin it's huge right now, surging in value. What are we thinking in terms of cryptocurrency?
Well, as an investment advisor, when you see a stock market going up as much as it does and Bitcoin going up equally as high, it makes you worry that things are a little bit out of control. Because Bitcoin had $100,000 per token. And now it looks like a new cryptocurrency czar is going to be pro-cryptocurrency. So this is a first time in many, many years. So we'll see. There's a lot of excitement about Bitcoin because one of the things about Bitcoin versus the other cryptos is you have to earn a token with Bitcoin. You have to go out and solve a math problem. Like Ethereum, the other ones are staked. I mean, somebody decided there's a value and they just work around that. Bitcoin, you have to earn it. So Bitcoin probably has a little more staying power, and now that it's worth almost $2 trillion, you can't just get rid of it.
Right.
So now it's a problem. I think they're going to ultimately make it like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, use Bitcoin to be something to shore up our currency and maybe help with the gold market as well. It's exciting, though. It's really exciting. There's projections that it could go to $2 million per token. So should we buy now? I don't know.
For looking at viability for the future, what do we think? Do we think this is a viable source of currency?
We do. We like the blockchain part of it. We like the new part of that blockchain where every transaction is now logged in somewhere. The trouble is there's nothing that backs it. So people that are traditional value people that look at the value of a house, you got lumber, you got land, there's nothing there for that. So we're going to have to figure out where it fits into our economy. But at this point, crypto is about $3 trillion overall. That's a huge asset.
And in terms of personal investments, how are people feeling about their investments following President-elect Trump?
Well, people are calling me up and thanking me, and they shouldn't do that because it's not me, it's the markets that are doing this. So it scares me a little bit when people feel so euphoric about things because I know how things work. It goes up and it goes down sometimes, but I'm not predicting that, but it could. When people are feeling too good, that worries me.
Okay, Mark, thank you. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure.
When we return, we'll be discussing personal finances and upcoming tax changes with an area tax accountant. You're watching 22 News in Focus. We're back here now with 22 News in Focus. It's the end of the year and time to take stock of your personal and business finances and to get ready to file your taxes as well. Joining me now is Paul Mancinoni, a tax attorney and certified public accountant with Paul L. Mancinoni Company. We thank you for being here on the program with us.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
So President-elect Trump has voiced his support of loosening business regulations and reducing taxes. I want to move right to the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. Well, that was a radical change to the tax code, especially on the business side. He dropped the tax rate of 35% down to 21%. and that was a monstrous change and really was good news for businesses. And to a smaller extent, Sierra, he dropped the tax rates for individuals as well, but not as dramatic as the businesses. And then the other big change related to the well, there were some dramatic changes on the estate tax side, but for 22 viewers that people would deal with on a regular basis, he did a lot of changes to itemized deductions. He raised the standard deduction, so people didn't really have to keep track of their mortgage interest and real estate taxes. He gave a big fat standard deduction to replace that. And that's those are coming up for retirement at the end of 2025. So we're going into an interesting time as to how this is all going to play out.
Yeah, and a lot, up in the air, a lot of consideration. So
Absolutely.
like you said, consider bringing back the deduction for state and local taxes. What would be the direct impact?
Yeah, well, the state and local income tax, he limited it to $10,000. So you could pay, a very wealthy person can pay $50,000 in state income tax and $40,000 in real estate tax. So he would have a $90,000 deduction there. It's limited to 10. That's how dramatic the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act was. That is expected on the books, Sierra, to come back into fruition January 1st, 2026. Now that President Trump has been reelected, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Congress will do something to extend what happened in 2017.
Okay, and in terms of exemptions, the idea of exempting various types of income from the income tax.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Well, I think the Wall Street Journal originally broke that. Well, what they talked about on the campaign, Sierra, usually related to Social Security came first, possibly not taxing Social Security. Then tip income entered the equation, possibly not taxing tips. Overtime pay was also considered. And then finally, frontline workers, firefighters, policemen, and maybe some military personnel. I think that laundry list is a little extensive, possibly impossible. But if I had to pick one that I think Congress would take a serious look at, it is the taxability of Social Security. And I say that because that is what's most in jeopardy 10, 12 years from now. So try to make it attractive in another way. That's what I'm thinking, Sierra.
Okay. And President-elect Trump has also proposed repealing the green energy tax credit. So let's talk about that for our viewers who maybe aren't familiar with this.
Well, I just came back from Los Angeles, where just about every other car is an EV. I never saw anything like it. I actually saw two Cybertrucks together at a traffic light. We don't see one a week here. So that's what he's talking about the most, is eliminating a $7,500 tax credit for purchasing an EV. That's also an attractive tax credit if you're trying to raise revenue, Sierra, because, for example, in California, 5 of the 6 New England states have something quasi-similar. By 2035, every new vehicle sold in California must be an electric vehicle. Why give a credit? They have to buy it. There's no incentive. It will be the law. In 2026, 35% of the new cars sold must be electric. So the reason for giving an incentive is starting to go away because the vehicle is becoming so popular. So I think that is one of the reasons why President Trump is looking at the EV credit so much, because it's not, people are willing to buy it without the credit at this point.
Right.
So he's talking about that a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
Has Congress done anything to improve the structure of the tax code?
No, I thank our Congress for making it more complicated every day. And I think when I was on the show a few years back, I had hair, and that's a direct result of Congress. The Supreme Court has done the most over the past year to the tax code, and I'll tell you how. In June, there was a big case called Loper Bright versus Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce, former governor of Rhode Island. When any law, any federal law, but let's talk about the IRS, this is the tax segment, when Congress issues a law that's a little vague, the IRS issues regulations to interpret that law. Those regulations are law in and of itself. This case by the Supreme Court said, no, not so fast. The law didn't say what the IRS is saying it says. So the IRS regulations got a little weaker this year, and a lot of cases are going to start coming down the pike challenging how the IRS interpreted those laws. It's going to be a fascinating time in tax law for tax geeks like me over the next couple of years, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the end of the year, so of course that means tax time, 2024 taxes. What are some notable changes to consider when you're filing?
Believe it or not, tax changes from 24 to 23, and I'll venture to say 25 to 24, aren't very dramatic, Sierra. Where the changes are inflationary adjustments that they do every year. If you were going to give a gift to your child of $18,000, it goes up to $19,000. Or the rates change a little bit. Or the standard deduction was $13,800 last year. It's going to be $14,200, that kind of thing. So I think the changes are not so much related to what new things are happening as much as they're incremental inflationary changes. Mm-hmm. You can put a little more into your retirement than you could last year because of inflation, things like that.
How about for 2025 changes?
I think it's going to be pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. If President Trump feels like doing something new and Congress agrees to make it retroactive to January 1st, that would be a change. As of now, we don't know of anything on the horizon. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And how about the documents that you should be preparing for?
Oh, my favorite time of year, tax preparation. Yes, that is around the corner. Well, everybody's different. So it's a little bit asking how a watch works. But Sierra, I think people should, within a month, they'll start getting documents in the mail or online. Their W-2 is very important. Any 1099s that they received. Investment advisory statements from Mark, from Raymond James, for example. That's a great example that us as preparers need. Mortgage interest documentation, real estate, medical expenses. God forbid somebody was very sick. Mm-hmm. Charitable contributions. If a couple or an individual owns a rental property, a tax preparer would need the income and expenses related to that. A small business, mm-hmm. we will need the income and expenses related to that. So items of that sort would get us started. Yeah.
How about for health flexible spending plans and medical savings accounts? Do those benefit individuals when it comes to taxes?
I think they're fantastic. I mean, I may, for somebody who's coming off a serious heart attack, I can assure you the health savings account is a wonderful tool. You can put money aside, almost like an IRA. Mm-hmm. You get a deduction for it, and you use that money to pay your expenses after your deductible, including your deductible amount. I think it's a wonderful tool.
Yeah, it's a tool that I use, and I've started getting acupuncture, and it's a great little resource to have.
Absolutely, I think they're wonderful, and more people should take advantage of them.
In terms of, big picture, just preparing, getting everything together, what should people's mind states be?
I think filing early is a prudent thing. Not too early. Not too early. You really don't want to file too mm-hmm. early because the states aren't ready and the federal government isn't quite ready yet. But when you have everything in order, earlier the better, and you're doing your preparer a favor as well.
Yeah, and to go over, all of the documents and things that you said would be beneficial for our viewers that are just joining us now, where's a good place for them to go and to see where they can check off all those boxes?
Oh boy, well, any quality preparer, I would lean more toward a CPA simply because mm-hmm. their background. But most firms will now give you an organizer that really helps you formulate your thoughts and help you get your information together, Sierra. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Paul, thanks so much
for
your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
After a short break, all of our guests will return for a panel discussion on the impact of the election and what to expect from the new administration. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Back now with 22 News in Focus, and we're moving into a panel discussion with our guests about what we can expect to see from the new administration, Congress, and the economic impacts. So let's start off with question number one. What are your expectations from the White House and Congress over the next 4 years? Tony, do you want to start?
Sure. I think what you're going to see right now is Congress kind of gingerly trying to figure out the reality of Donald Trump and this new administration. What's bluster, what's real, etc. And one other thing you're going to see from Congress, both House and Senate, they understand and they realize it's Donald Trump's Washington right now. And I know, whether you love him, hate him, whatever, the bottom line, he's controlling the whole 9 yards. He leads. That's what we expect to see right now. We're not expecting to see a lot of activity that's initiated from the House and not from the Democrats. They'll wait to try to figure out how this feels.
Mark?
My expectations are that it's so divided in this country right now, and you can feel the sour mood of the public.
Yes.
If they can unify the country somehow on some issues, I think that goes a long way to solving a lot of our problems.
Yeah, Paul.
Massive changes in the tax code. That's what I see.
Yeah.
How about key policy issues? Mark, what are you thinking?
I think it's going to be migration. I think it's going to be taxes. I think it's going to be a new way of doing business in America that's pro-individual and pro-small business. I think this era of big business running things and coordinating with the government, I think that might be over.
Yeah. Paul, what do you think?
Well, I think President Trump is a student of Reagan, and lower taxes means more people spending with the money that they get to keep in their pocket. And I think he's a student of that, and I think we're going to see policies in that direction.
And a lot of the folks that he's appointed would fall right into that as well, too. They're Reagan, Bush aficionados. And by that I mean Bush one. But I think Paul and Mark are right on target there.
Yeah, and Mark, you were saying migration you think will be, of course, we've seen it in the headlines every day almost. So, Trump has promised to crack down on migration and enact the largest deportation in U.S. history. Of course, Massachusetts, we have certain protections and things here, but what are we thinking big picture?
Personally, I think he's going to get rid of the people that have a criminal background. He's going to call it a victory. Because the idea of deporting 10 to 15 million people or whatever the number is a gargantuan project, and I don't think he could pull it off. I mean, seriously, I don't think he could pull it off. I don't know.
Mark, I think you're on target. It's so onerous an objective to try to pull off. You call the victory where you can. And perception-wise, the entities that are still around Donald Trump, the political entities, the PACs, the others, and the campaign, frankly, that's still kind of in place, they're going to try to explain that to average, regular Americans. Here's the victory. He got rid of the bad guys.
Yeah.
That'll be the play. Yeah.
I think our non-criminal immigrants are an important part of this economy, whether it's agriculture and it's, we can't just get rid of them like that. I question the viability of that comment.
And the fact that, and Tony, you helped me with this, we have not heard any outcry from corporate America about all these people here that are helping us do the jobs that nobody else wants to do. The fact that there's been no screaming about that means we have to find a way for them to mix into our country in a way that will keep them here.
The quiet conversations in the back halls from the corporate lobbyists, the rest, they're talking about this in a way, as Mark just described, without a doubt, that there's a reality here. We need some of these folks. When in Western Mass, we certainly do, especially in our agricultural communities here, without a doubt.
And there's always talks about cuts to Medicare and Social Security as well, right? So polls are finding that Americans are concerned about losing benefits and that they've paid into those benefits. So what are we thinking in terms of, the new administration moving forward with that?
I think he would betray the people that voted for him if he went after Medicare and Social Security. I think he will not touch that. He will do anything but that, in my opinion. I don't know.
He's looking for the likable legacy right now. He knows this is it. There's no more after this. And you're right. That's the kind of thing where there would be such blowback from the MAGA base that supported him because they don't want to feel any more pain. They feel that they felt enough. And so I think he's going to be very conscious and very careful of that.
Well, what I would add to that is, although not in Trump's term, 2036, Social Security has a very serious problem. And I think what people think, if somebody thinks they're going to get $2,000 a month in 2036, I think that number is going to be something less. And I think we have to realize that, unless something dramatic happens. And we've been hoping for something dramatic for 25 years now. We're going to have to address it, or we are not going to get it. The people who retire 10 years from now are not going to be getting what they were promised.
So in terms of the possibility of cuts, what impact do we think that would have?
cuts on Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah.
Exactly the politics of this. I mean, there will be Republican members then who are getting the drift that this is Trump's DC, but this is something that's going to hurt them back at home. When their constituents start saying, oh my gosh, my Social Security, my Medicare, my retirement, so to speak, what am I going to do? When they start feeling that kind of pain, that means that those members of the House, especially who are up for re-election every 2 years, that starts to move and change. They'll make a hue and cry to the president and hopefully be able to find a way to mitigate this back and forth and come up with a negotiated fix. Because it's always been the third rail of politics, Social Security, and touching it or cutting it. But in this particular instance, Paul hit it out of the ballpark. There's no more time. This is it. And we've been putzing around for 25 years on it. Yeah.
Didn't Richie Neal actually give us the roadmap, though?
Yes.
With the Secure Act 2.0 when he said, you start taking your R&D at 73 and 75.
Yep.
Didn't he sort of give us where he's heading?
Yeah.
So maybe we're all working till 73 or 75.
Yeah.
That probably depresses you, Sierra.
I have a long way to go. But, to touch on that, full retirement age for Social Security has risen, right, from 65 to 67 now. And there's some talks about maybe even, like you said, raising that. So what should people do now to prepare? It feels like you have forever, but quickly, things go quick.
They have to realize they're a free agent. They have to take care of themselves. They have to pay themselves first. They have to focus on medical health savings accounts, Roth 401k plans, all of the stuff that they're giving you. You just have to take advantage of it and stop spending so much money.
Bang. Very good advice. I'm not going to touch those. They're the experts here, so I'm going to go right to Paul because I've heard some great thoughts from him.
Tony,
outside of here. Yeah.
I am pleased we live in a civil country because if you talk about raising the retirement age in France, I mean, they flip buses over. Thank goodness we are
right.
here.
Yeah.
But it's people have to start taking care of themselves if they have to keep working until they're 70. I mean, that's the reality. What I would suggest is if you're 65 and now you're thinking about work until you're 70, goodness me, see Mark. Because your retirement funds have 5 more years. And I'm sure there's some great opportunities there that Mark can help with. I think that's prudent thinking to help you get prepared.
For the average person that's out there, a lot of this stuff is just above and beyond their ability to deal with it. And you can't make a mistake. So you should see an expert to make sure that you got it right. Because when you're in that tight of a time frame, 5 more years to go, 6 more years to go, 10, you can't make a mistake at this stage of the game.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation after a quick break. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. We're continuing with our panel discussion on what the new Trump administration will be trying to accomplish in the next 4 years. So we're going to start with national debt and the budget. I know, Mark, you said you were eager to kick this off. Do you think Congress will extend the continuing resolution?
I absolutely think they will, and I think something else is going on. In college I studied economics. We are all Keynesians now. The idea of spending money to get things done is now very, very appealing to congressmen. And I think it's very appealing to this president. And I think he'd like to cut areas so that he could spend more in other areas. I think we're in a spending free-for-all, and it's going to continue. And Paul, weigh in on this, but I could just sense that there's a demand to spend money. Because they're talking about cutting $2 trillion. There's no way they're going to cut $2 trillion. No. And if they do, it's going to go be spent somewhere else. So, and I think it's to make American industry stronger, better, and faster.
Absolutely, and I think they're going to do that. What I found over this past election year, you and I spoke briefly, Tony, is that neither candidate really spoke about the deficit. And I wish they did. And that was a bit of a disappointment because, Judgment Day has to come. We can't keep running deficits every year. And on both sides, they were quick to blame for the past, but as far as a plan for the future, that bothered me over the past year. I was hoping.
Politically, public-wise, the electorate doesn't really understand deficit. They've been hearing about it all their lives, no matter how their age is. Right. It's this great big thing out there. Yeah, it's always been there. It's almost like the old uncle that shows up at Christmas or whatever, right? Yep. It's there. On the flip side, to what both Paul and Mark have said, if you're an individual member of Congress, you're protected by how many members of Congress there are. And you want to spend. You want to bring it back to your district because that's what it's all about. And you're spending somebody else's money, the nation's money, not just your district's. Yeah.
Where will the new administration want to spend more? do we think?
I think Trump would like to spend more money to protect American industries from outside competition. I think he looks at the Chinese as nothing more than undercutting. There's an electric car company called BID that's sitting on the Mexican border, about to bring in $8,000 to $10,000 electric cars. He knows what that'll do to American industry. I think he wants to protect us and also defend the country.
Brilliant thought in that regard. BID is on his mind, a few other things. The fact that Joe Biden, in this exit now, just loaned or gave $6.6 billion to Rivian, that makes no sense at all. You're going to see the Doge group, and you're going to see Donald Trump look at things like that and say, I've got somewhere else to put that money, without a doubt. And defense is going to be big, because when you take a look at the players in that group of 40 billionaires who supported him, though that PAC group that was out there in that regard, they are all tied into the defense industry, and that is jobs. It's jobs here in Western Mass. It's jobs in Connecticut. It's a double win for Trump to go in that direction.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the military is something that President Trump is very strong on, and that's great for New England, Connecticut. Yes.
So President Trump is also a big fan of deregulation, promising to roll back on some of the regulations implemented by the Biden administration. What are those regulations, do we think?
I think the financial regulations is probably the first place he wants to cut. I mean, Dodd-Frank is a monster. It's not 10 commandments that Moses brought from the mountain. It's a million commandments. It's a million commandments. And it affects everybody and everything. So I think you start cutting that stuff, he'll save a lot of money, a lot of aggravation. And there'll be a lot of gnashing of teeth for a while. But it really does look like if he does that in the next 3 years, gets rid of some of the criminal illegal migrants, he could declare victory on everything at that point.
You'll see him go heavy, as we've heard in the campaign, and see him already preparing to do, the Department of Education, if it exists at the end of the next 4 years. The Consumer Protection Agency, he's aimed right at that. And those are easy checkoffs, because the average regular person on the Consumer Protection Agency says, what have they done for me, or what's that all about? There'll be some others as well, too, and it'll be interesting to see the battles that may come if Bobby Kennedy is in fact confirmed, what he does relative to some of his thoughts on American food products and food production, etc. That will be interesting to see the battles that go on, corporate versus Bobby versus Donald. And will the president step in? More than likely, he'll probably have a significant conversation with Bobby Kennedy in the Rose Garden about that.
Well, I can only tell you from a personal, as a CPA tax attorney, all my corporate clients are happy about deregulation. And I would also add that there'll be no deregulation in the tax code, I can promise you.
Increased oil drilling and nuclear energy also, President Trump speaking about that as well. But there are concerns that he may pull out of the Paris Agreement. So if that happens, what are we looking at?
I think he's definitely going to pull out of that.
No question.
And I think as far as oil drilling, he's going to get pushback from oil executives who don't want the price to go down. Because if you have supply and demand imbalance right now, and they all of a sudden drill, baby, drill, and you bring in 3 more million barrels per day, price goes to 30, they're not making money at $30 a barrel. Nuclear power, though, however, is a really interesting one because all the billionaires are paying for that. They're buying up old, vacant, mothballed nukes, and that, to me, is a really exciting area. There's a company called GE Vernova that now makes wind turbines and nuclear reactors. So things like that, I think, are very attractive to everybody. I don't know.
Yep, without a doubt. And the more strategic, bigger view of this, we know what Donald Trump thinks relative to Russia and China. And, my 6-year-old godson can come up with this one. Russia and China's economies are in horrific shape. America's is astonishing. I want to take a second on this piece. It amazes me how rich we are, how much we can spend, how many billions we can send to Ukraine, and still have the incredible economy and strength that we are as a nation. Trump won't want to see that stop. He'll pour it in those directions, without a doubt. And he knows it's all about energy and fuel. And the nuke thing is interesting to a lot of us right now.
Well, I simply defer to my learned colleagues on that. I'm just a tax guy.
I also want to touch on tariffs. We've talked a lot about tariffs, Mark. Any concerns about the possible impact to the U.S. economy?
Yeah, I think without a doubt. Relative to tariffs, there's the concept that the fear that will make things more expensive for the average regular person if you're going out to buy an appliance, etc. I'm hearing this right now from some of our corporate clients that are in manufacturing. They're getting a lot more calls for their products right now before January 20th because they're thinking after January 20th, it goes up. A little economic bump right now from folks out of that fear. But often, the other thing about tariffs, I agree with Mark earlier, I don't like them. I think it's, it's a false narrative, so to speak. But the other thing is this Trump negotiating? Is this Trump negotiating with Mexico for other things? Is this Trump negotiating with Canada for other things? I don't think we're going to be too punitive to Canada when it comes to tariffs and whatnot. But Mark brought up a good point before.
Yeah.
Chinese company in Mexico, right over the line with a $10,000 EV. And there's a lot of other stuff coming out of Mexico. I think that's on Trump's mind. What can he do to deal here to get other things addressed?
Well, we're blessed with one of the best district attorneys in the country. I really believe
Literally,
it.
yeah.
And he talks about fentanyl. And President Trump talks about a tariff on China and Mexico until fentanyl is controlled. Everybody knows somebody who was subject to an overdose. And that's an ugly pill we're swallowing, and I'm not convinced the tariff with Mexico and China until the flow of fentanyl stops.
Yeah.
I mean, one conversation with District Attorney Gallooni, and you will lose sleep on what fentanyl is doing.
Yeah.
And so tariffs in that aspect, I'm all for.
Paul, I love that analogy and that example because that's what I'm referring to. I think that Trump will find other things. He's a multi-deal guy. How many things can I get in exchange for giving you one thing, And the fentanyl piece, what you said about District Attorney Gallooni, you're on target. Yeah. Here's someone that around the nation, people are looking to on this and other issues. So interesting,
I was going to say something about China. President Xi yesterday was invited to the inauguration. I mean, how incredible is this guy Trump to do that? I mean, he now puts Xi on the hot seat. Yeah. And the hot seat has been on China for now at least 6-7 years. And they are folding a little bit. They're having some real deep problems that they keep covering over with wallpaper and asphalt, but it's not covering them up to the rest of the world. We know what's going on. So it looks like we could really extend our lead here. And I think everybody in America knows that. So it's game theory. We know what they know what we know, and we're pressing our point here. So
I wish we had more time, gentlemen. I know we're just getting into some good stuff, but yes, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much. Appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good show.
You've been watching 22 News in Focus, and today we've been discussing what to expect from the Trump presidency and its impact on our economy and personal finances. We want to thank all of our guests for being on the program, and we want to thank our viewers for watching at home. If you missed any of our show, you can find it on our website at wwlp.com. From all of us here at 22 News, have a great Sunday.